we've got 12 months until COP26. The UK government seem more interested in posturing on the international stage than taking any serious action to address the climate crisis.
Ideally, we'd like to be having a proper march, but obviously because of COVID we can't.
So we're pretending there's people standing here and with the steps protesting. Our carbon footprint has increased even during COVID.
For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight.
I think it's the wettest demonstration I've been on in Scotland, but this is a little bit of history. Every demonstration that I've been on that's been this size has made history.
Hello and welcome to Independence Live. I'm Iain Bruce in Glasgow and this is Rising Clyde, the programme where we'll be talking about the key issues and the big challenges facing the struggle for climate justice here in Scotland and around the world. In this first episode, we want to get an overview of where the movement's at in Scotland now, 4 months after those huge demonstrations in Glasgow and the whole build up to COP26, which you saw a little bit of in that video at the start. In order to do that, I'm very happy that we're joined by 3 activists who've been central to the movement before, during and now since COP26. First, Anna Brown is a leading member of Fridays for Future here in Glasgow. Fridays for Future, the organisation that organised and came out of the school strikes initiated by Greta Thunberg, and I believe you have another one coming up later this month, Anna. I'm sure you'll tell us about that later. Also, Megan Rose is an organiser with StopCambo. StopCambo, that's the campaign to put an end to the new oil field that was planned off Shetland. Of course, the fact that Shell pulled out of that project shortly after COP and the remaining company, Siccar Point Energy, has had to shelve the project for the moment is one of the big victories we've had since COP26. So I guess we can blame you a little bit for that victory, Megan. Anyway, and last but not least, Stephen Smellie is a member of the leadership of UNISON, the public service workers union, the biggest union in Britain. And Stephen's been played a central role in building those bridges between the trade union movement and the climate justice movement, which bore fruit here in Glasgow in November. And that's work that's continuing through the trade union caucus of the coalition. So thank you very much indeed to all of you for being with us. And I'd just like to say to those of you at home watching, if you want to add comments or questions in the comments section, please do go ahead and we'll do our best to keep up with that. I want to start by asking each of you to say very briefly what you think the key priority for the movement is in the period ahead. Anna, do you want to go first?
I think right now one of our key focuses is looking beyond COP is really getting more people engaged within the movement. At COP we saw how many people can turn out and are engaged, and now it's really doing that outreach to get more people involved, especially in the run up for us to our next global strike and then also the council elections in May.
Council elections, that's an interesting one. I think we should talk about that at some point too. Megan, what about you?
I think that one of our main priorities at the moment is maintaining that interconnectedness that we gained through COP. I think a lot of the achievements we've made in StopCambo has been because it's been such a wonderful coalition of different organisations taking part. And if we can keep that level of interconnectedness going forwards, we're going to achieve a lot more.
Thank you so much. And Stephen?
Yeah, pretty much the same. We need to keep the movement going. There's a real danger that with everything else that's going on, that people lose sight of what we were arguing and winning the arguments about last year. So, yeah, we need to keep building that movement, make it broader, make it deeper, and get more of our organisations involved in searching out the solutions, because we had a lot of talk last year, as we know, a lot of blah, blah, blah. We now need to really get the actions going on ahead of COP27.
I mean, I've heard this said at almost everything I've attended since COP26, this need to try and hold the movement together and build on that momentum. Do any of you feel there's been a loss of momentum, that things have drifted apart a bit? We'll come back to this in more detail, but just initially, I wonder if you think that is a problem.
I think that's always a problem when we march people up to the top of a hill of a big event like COP. That some people will think, well, that's great, that the demonstration was wonderful, really enjoyed that, that's fantastic. But it's coming up to Christmas now, or going back to this and that and the other. And of course, with the cost of living crisis and the war, then obviously, which we'll talk about, no doubt. Yeah, there is a real danger of that, and I think people have some of the organisations which committed a lot, some of the individuals committed a lot. Were a bit tired, it has to be said, after COP, and took a break. But I think that I think the structure of that movement is still there, and I'm not worried about that. We will be back there. We will mobilise again.
Yeah, I think the kind of want within organisations and everyone who's involved in COP to keep working together and keep that momentum going is really there. It's just kind of the capacity and people keeping going after such a big event, but everyone really does want to keep that going. So it's just kind of how we make that happen, and with everything else that is happening now.
Stephen, you actually mentioned exactly what I was going to ask you about next, which is, there have been two really major events, apparently very different kind of events in the last month or so, which seem to have changed the situation we're operating in. The first, of course, was the cost of living crisis, the announcement that, the massive increase in gas prices, especially, and the way that's going to hit people, especially from next month. And the second, even more recently, of course, the war in Ukraine. I'm just wondering to what extent you think that's changed the terrain. Either or both of those things have changed the terrain. I mean, this morning, just as a small example, obviously both of those issues are connected with gas and energy and transition and all those issues. Just this morning on the Today programme, I heard a fund manager arguing that it was obvious now with the war in Ukraine that we had to reverse what he called the hostile environment established around development of North Sea oil and gas in order to replace the gas that we ought to stop taking from Russia. So I mean, I don't know, Megan, maybe you could kick us off on this one. Do you feel that the kind of terms of the argument have changed in one direction or the other because of all this?
I think what we're definitely seeing is a change in how we're messaging it. The actual aims aren't changing at all, because a large part of our issue is our reliance on gas and our reliance on oil that exists as it currently stands. Changing to using mostly North Sea oil isn't really going to make that much of a difference in the long term to the cost of living crisis, definitely, and to the ongoing war in Ukraine. It could have some effect, but the end goal should be moving away from gas, because that gives us far more stability than trying to invest more in North Sea oil and North Sea oil gas, because that's still, the prices are still decided by global markets. So it's not going to help with the cost of living crisis, and a dependence on gas is still going to have a lot of volatility no matter which direction we're going in there.
Yeah, I mean, it seems such an obvious argument, doesn't it? I mean, both of those things you would think it would be ABC, that just reinforces what we've been saying all along, and yet people, some people, especially on sections of the right, essentially, are using it to argue exactly the opposite. I don't know. Any other comments on this?
They know they're on the back foot. They're going to use any opportunity they can at this point. So they're using it as an opportunity, but there really isn't one. There's nothing for them to stand on here.
Yeah, I would agree with that in principle, but you're right. There are people who will argue that the reliance on Russian gas can only be dealt with by using more of our own North Sea oil gas. And for those people who have a vested interest in that, the companies the BPs and Shells who have made vast amounts of profits out of the cost of living crisis, they will see that as, okay, let us go ahead with that. And within the trade union movement, there's the debate and the discussion, which has always been there, about how do we protect jobs. And this, this gives a sense that, well, that would be one way of doing it. But even if CAMBO was to go ahead, it would be a number of years before anything would be flown out of CAMBO. So it wouldn't help to solve the cost of living crisis just now. The answer to the over-reliance on gas, whether that's North Sea gas or Russian gas, is to have more renewable energy, so we don't use gas at all. That's the answer. So it doesn't change the terrain of our arguments at all. It slightly shifts some of the arguments our opponents, if you like, would use. They'll use that. They'll use anything, whether it's war in Ukraine or whether it's the cost of living. They'll use that to put forward their arguments for, we should just continue using fossil fuels because it'll be more secure and the rest of it. It won't be. It won't be, because it's not secure. That's the whole point about climate change, that we understand. The future is not secure whilst we keep burning fossil fuels. So we need to grasp that nettle and resist the temptation and resist the siren calls from the big profiteers who are making money out of our crisis, and focus on the target, which is to reduce and eventually remove fossil fuels from our energy mix.
I mean, I'm sure we'd all agree with that. I'm just wondering, are we winning the argument? Have these new event situations, is that is it tilting the argument in favor of the climate justice argument, or do you think people will listen to those other, in our view, distorted interpretations of what this means?
My own view is that it'll be a difficult argument. There's no getting away from it. There'll be a debate. Some of the right-wing media will be very clearly on the side of you continue to use fossil fuels. So we need to take it on. It's not something we can just assume we won the argument last year, therefore we'll win it this year as well. We need to keep those arguments going. I mean, it does strike me that everybody's talking about sanctions. We've been lobbying our pension funds, for example, to divest from fossil fuels, and you can't do that, and that would be terrible. Within days of Russia invading Ukraine, pension funds in Scotland were talking about how they can divest from Russia and Russian investments, so they can do it when there's a need to. And the reliance that Germany has on fossil fuels from Russia can't be replaced by pumping in oil or gas from anywhere else. They need to step up their renewable energy industries so that they can, eventually, if they want to take sanctions against Russia and stop the gas flow, fine, but they need to have that replacement, and that replacement has to be renewables.
Megan, how do you feel the kind of momentum is around the StopCambo movement and the continuation of that?
We've still got a lot of momentum. So obviously we have had a big win with StopCambo, and that brought in a lot more people, and we're now in a moment of re-strategizing. So we're looking at what our next targets are going to be and how we're going to approach that. We've nearly finalized that, but we have a lot of people that are really interested in getting involved now at this stage, now that they've seen the success of the campaign so far and how we can go forward and use this approach to hopefully more fields, but also more importantly to target the UK government and their own policy. And we're also putting a really big focus on working more with workers in the industry and looking at just transition and how we can help them the most as well.
I mean, what do you think? I mean, I wanted to move on to the lessons, and I think that's a good point to do it. I mean, what have you? I mean, you say you're re-strategizing after that victory. What are the lessons to be drawn from that victory? I mean, I know you shouldn't be too presumptive, because things could be reversed, but it certainly is a partial and temporary victory at the very least, an important one. I don't know if it's possible to kind of sum up in a nutshell, how was that victory brought about, and what can the rest of the movement draw as a lesson from that, do you think? Is that easy to do?
I can try. I think there's probably a lot of reasons why the StopCambo campaign was successful, but one of them is we had a really massive diversity of tactics and a really large number of people that were involved. So we had a lot of capacity, but also a lot of different tactics that we could try and target different parts. So we weren't just looking at attacking the government, we were also looking at the organisation involved, so that was Shell and Sticker Point. And then, so it was a mix of different targets and then different ways of targeting them as well. And we had involvement in campaigns across the UK, and we even had solidarity from organisations across the world as well. So the lessons learned is mostly use everything you've got. Don't hold back. If you're trying to stop something as big as an oil field, it's a big task, but if you use everything, you've got a really good chance.
Anna, or Stephen, did you draw any lessons from the StopCambo experience?
Anna?
I think for us it was partly just like the interconnectedness of it all, so all the groups working together, and the diversity of tactic of methods. Like as Megan said, it's not just the one person you need to aim at kind of in any of these situations. It is really a variety of people and any kind of magnitude of things, so CAMBO, etc. And I think that was kind of one of the things a lot of people really kind of admired about the campaign and looked at, was really how it aimed at everything.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the StopCambo campaign was a magnificent example of imaginative and creative activities, but it was also tapped in to the mood of at the time, where everyone was, working towards COP. We were building a big movement where everyone was talking about it, and the sense of the argument was just won over by everyone. And of course, it became the stage that nobody supported CAMBO except the governments who were last to blink, if you like, and then of course Shell blinked before even the governments blinked. So I think that there's a combination of that kind of the tactics, also just the broad base of the support for the arguments in total, and it was a terrific, not a complete victory because it's still, as you say, could turn back, but it was a great achievement. It was something that really lifted us after COP, after that period when you're exhausted, but suddenly you get this really good news, and it was great.
I mean, one thing that I had a question mark about, I think, was, the StopCambo campaign was obviously very visible all around COP. It was one of the most visible slogans on the streets and so forth. Yeah. And just after COP, the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, apparently changed her position on CAMBO. Yeah, and literally days. I think about 4 days after COP, it was something like that. Mm-hmm. And then I think a week after that, Shell decided that it wasn't going to be economically viable or something. So I'm just, it's just going to. I wonder if that sequence of events is an accident, or to what it says about the combination between power on the streets, demonstrations on the streets, government policy, and the polluters and the business interests. I don't know. Can we draw any conclusions about that, or is it a kind of a coincidence?
I think politicians. Sorry, Megan.
On you go, Stephen. On you go.
I was just going to say, I think politicians are influenced by two things. One is what their constituency is saying, and I think it was quite clear in the run up to November and during November that Scottish people of all parties, were committed to that ideal about what COP was about, or should have been about. We know it wasn't, but what it should have been about, what it's selling on the streets, and the mobilisations, not just on the big demonstration on the Saturday, but all the way through that, convinced politicians that they needed to be seen to be on the right side. But it's true that politicians like to be on the winning side as well, and I don't know if Nicola got forewarned about Shell's decision and therefore decided she needs to move before Shell moved first. I don't know, but those, I think, one of the lessons to take out is we can actually influence politicians to do the right thing, and that's one of the we can mark that down as one of the achievements that we persuaded the First Minister of Scotland, who, in a country which the whole independence movement was based upon our oil and all that for many, many years, suddenly that First Minister turned against that on the back of the pressure that she must have felt from Megan and her colleagues in the campaign and the general mood that was created. So yeah, I think Megan and her colleagues should be extremely proud of having turned that around.
You remind me of one of the slogans I think it was on the Independence block on the March on the 6th, which I always really liked. It was like, it's Scotland's oil, leave it in the soil. Megan, you were gonna say something there.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen, by the way. I am very proud of the entire movement. They've done so much. The StopCambo campaign has been such a wonderful thing to be a part of. But yeah, in reference to whether it was a coincidence, all those things happening, just one after the other, I don't think it was at all. I mean, we managed to get StopCambo messaging out from the first event of COP all the way through. It was being broadcast to global stages, to all these world leaders, from UK activists mostly, that we were really unhappy about this happening. And I think Nicola Sturgeon being in that mix, seeing that being broadcast quite a lot, would definitely have had a massive influence on our own decision. I mean, even as we had Fridays for Future activists made a statement about StopCambo at the conference for youth just before COP started as well. So we had involvement from people from lots of different organisations that were putting StopCambo messaging at the heart of COP. And so we weren't surprised to see Nicola Sturgeon's statement, but we were very, very proud of it. It was a really, really massive turning point. Shell's one did catch us by surprise, but I think given the sequence of events that preceded it, it does make sense, and it wasn't so much of a coincidence as, it would have made sense for them to make that strategically from a business point of view.
Great. I'm just going to make a quick apology to our audience at home here now, because I'm seeing there's a whole load of questions in the chat here, and I'm getting my head around how to operate this StreamYard system that we're using, and I actually can't read them and sort of keep up the conversation at the same time. So, but that's I'll try and dip through them in a moment, but I'm more interested in what you guys are saying at the moment. I wonder what other lessons there are that we should be drawing from. I mean, I was amazed by November, but a lot of us had been involved with the movement in the coalition and so on and so forth for a year or more before that. And although people talked about 100,000 as a target, to be honest, I never believed we were going to get even halfway there, And when it was at least 100,000, some people say 150,000, and then all the rest of the stuff going on, it was just mind-blowing, really, But I just wonder what lessons we need to draw from that. I mean, it just seems to be that there seems to be such a horrible danger, it kind of like just slipping into history, So I don't know, what other lessons do you think we could? I mean, I think the CAMBO stuff is certainly an important one. I mean, what about Fridays for Future? Because, people were talking about Fridays for Future. I mean, the Fridays for Future demonstration on the Friday in November was also amazing, And people have been saying, the school strikes, they kind of lost momentum and this, that, and the other. I mean, how do you? What lessons are you drawing in Fridays for Future, Anna?
I think for us it was similar to StopCambo. It really was the power of kind of everyone working together and what bringing everyone together really does. And what we've been talking about a lot is really coming back to the stories. One of the most powerful thing about the demonstrations at COP was you had the people in Glasgow who could tell the stories from all over the world and who were facing the crisis in ways people in Glasgow and around Scotland hadn't really seen before. So we've been talking a lot about the power of stories and not just the science, and really like the connecting to people a lot more, kind of in links to the cost of living crisis, and really just that working together and how when you really do put the work in, it does work. Obviously, there's a level of it was COP, there was going to be more going on than there would for normal demonstrations kind of thing. But it really was everyone working together, and I think that's kind of something everyone took from it and something people have really tried to keep going. One of the things we've really been building on is our links with trade unions. Been working with STUC and everyone, WIFOs a lot more, to try and keep all of that going.
I certainly two of the things I felt were so strong were that exactly the global South present and those presence in Glasgow and all those links, the kind of the way you felt those things were connecting, like throughout the 2 weeks, at so many different levels, and which was also a bit of a surprise for me, the degree of trade union involvement, which I don't think had really happened before in the climate movement. So how are we going to build on those two things?
Can I just say, the other thing the other lesson that's really strong, as well as the fact that we can build a broad movement, international movement, which is continuing, but this issue about young people, my 10-year-old grandson, Oliver, who lives down in the south of England, he was watching all the stuff on the news and stuff online. And when his mum contacted me after the Friday demonstration, Oliver wants to know if I'd met Greta, because he was, and I didn't, but I got got close enough to take a good photograph of her, and he was really pleased therefore to get that. So that's 10-year-old kids who are are linking into this. It's not just the school students like Anna and who are taking foreign strikes. Young people are now clued into this. Young people, and it's their future. And I do think that we can't fail to win if we have the future on our side. And I am just really encouraged by that, and the number of young people who were on both demonstrations. Some in their school uniforms, some with their teachers, some with their parents, some with their grandparents, some of them free from running away from them and free from just a hell of a time on it. It was magnificent, and we have the future on our side. Not only on our side, but in our ranks, marching with us. That's we can win. Therefore,
yeah, that's definitely something we found as well with COP. We'd had back at September 20th in 2019. You'd have things like had school classes coming as classes from school to the Friday strikes, and you'd have kids set up for corners at the strike so they could participate in different ways. And it's just really amazing that you see really the kind of wide variety of people who participate in these things.
Megan, any more on that? I see we're drawing towards the end of our time. We've got a couple more minutes, but so let's try and sort of round it up a bit with a bit more on like the what next stuff,
I mean, for me, the main lessons that we got were just similar to the interconnectedness, working with global networks. So we started doing a lot of solidarity work with groups worldwide. So given that StopCambo was doing quite well as a campaign and still is, using our following and our networks to help support other campaigns like AECOP, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline. We've been doing some work with networks in other countries and other continents to try and make sure that any following and any movement growth that we have, we can also lend that to others in other places and show solidarity with them.
How is that a difficult sell? I'm just thinking about, obviously there are some countries, I mean, just recent examples that I can remember off the top of my head, like Guyana in South America and Namibia in Southern Africa, who have recently, or relatively recently, think they've discovered vast amounts of oil and are thinking this is going to sort of lift them out of poverty. Is this a difficult argument to make, with people who suddenly see fossil fuels as a possible salvation,
I think it can be a difficult one in some situations, but in the long term, using other resources, natural ones, and going for renewable resources is going to be far more beneficial to any country who's looking to get more energy and make a profit through that. I mean, every single country that's looking at fossil fuel extraction now has a good number of activists that are also looking at fighting against it because they're aware that there are better ways of trying to source your energy and trying to generate profit. And it's mostly working with those activists so that they have the resources to communicate with their own countries and showing solidarity with the work that they're doing. It's not necessarily something that I, as a Scottish StopCambo activist, for example, am going to be trying to sell. It's something there are already activists on the ground that are aware of better alternatives that they can use, and it's just showing solidarity to them in their work.
Just very quickly, Stephen. So looking ahead towards, I know you've been doing a lot of thinking about COP27 too. We're going to go into a lot of these issues in more detail in future programs. But just briefly, what's the international perspective for the movement from Scotland? Do you think over the next few months?
Well, I think people. The next COP27 is going to be in Africa. It's going to be in Egypt. So the African people, the trade unions in Africa, the civil society in Africa, they need to lead, and our job is to give them solidarity and support them. And we in the Trade Union Caucus have had meetings with the colleagues in Africa and thinking about how we can support them. But they are looking to us in terms of the lessons we learned and how we did what we did. And I think there's a lot we can contribute to that. Climate change won't be won in Scotland. It wouldn't be won in Egypt either. It'll be won internationally. And we, in the developed countries, need to build those alliances and genuine solidarity. And it's not about telling them, well, you can't use that oil. It's about supporting them to understand how they can move forward in future and support their demands. Because one of the big demands in the discussions in COP was about loss and damage. The amount of damage which has been done in the developing world already by our use of fossil fuels. And then some people are denying them the right, as they see it, to have the same levels of prosperity. So we need to work with them to achieve their demands about the funding, the 100 billion a year that they were promised, still haven't got, to allow them to mitigate to the damage they already suffering. So there's a real need for us to step up our international work, and what we all achieved, young people, the CAMBO campaign, the trade unions did last year was really established for the first time, I think, in all the COPs, a proper and genuine international coalition to take these things forward, and that's a huge thing, and therefore we need to take that forward. And just as we're all saying at the outset, it's about taking forward our movement on an international basis. And doing that, we can support our colleagues in Africa, who will be the leaders in the next 11 months up to COP.
Thanks very much. I'm ready. We're going to have to close it down there because we have come to the end of our time. But yeah, with that thought and the thought you just gave us before of the future within our ranks, which is a kind of hopeful message, I think. Yeah, and we'll come back to many of these issues. Thank you so much to all of you for kicking off this first episode of Rising Clyde. And we look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.